Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hi, everyone.
We've got some really interesting material today. It's comments and an interview from a specific congresswoman, and it covers, well, a lot of ground.
It really does. We're going to be looking at, tech leaders and government roles, then diving into economic policy debates.
Yeah, and then there's a whole section on immigration detention conditions.
Uh-huh. And political ethics, business dealings, and finally, something super relevant right now. Disaster preparedness.
Yeah.
Hurricane season.
It's, wow, quite the mix from this one source. So our mission, as always, is to kind of walk you through.
Pull out the key stuff, those interesting details.
Exactly. Help you get a quick handle on the main points and what they might mean, all based strictly on what's in this material we have here.
Think of it as us helping you connect the dots from this perspective.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this.
So first up, the material discusses Elon Musk, specifically his previous role as a special government employee and why he left.
Right. And it highlights his stated reason, or part of it anyway, disappointment with massive government spending in a bill.
Yeah, he reportedly felt it undermined the work of the DOJ, the Department of Justice.
And there's that striking detail about the numbers, isn't there? The source mentions Musk aiming for, what, $2 trillion in spending cuts?
A huge number, but then it contrasts that with expert estimates suggesting the actual cuts were, well, way lower, maybe $150 billion, possibly less even.
That's a pretty big gap between the goal and the reported reality there.
It is, and what's interesting, the source also notes Musk apparently still hoped to advise the president.
Even while raising concerns. And there was that other point, too, about his call for the DOJ's mission to become a way of life across government. The source seemed to flag that.
Exactly, which kind of leads into the next bit, potential future accountability.
Ah, right. Congressional oversight. The source mentions this possibility, specifically if Democrats were to gain a House majority.
Uh-huh. And the idea of bringing Musk in to testify under oath.
And they get specific about what that testimony might cover, according to the source.
Yeah. Pretty serious allegations mentioned. Claims of illegal, unlawful rummaging in private tax information, also invading Social Security data illegally, and invasion of private personal data in IRS records, Internal Revenue Service data.
So based on this material, it seems the focus is really on accountability, and the tricky areas where private individuals, government roles, and data privacy collide.
Especially with things like tax and Social Security info. It's definitely complex.
Okay, so shifting from that individual focus, the source then moves to a critique of a specific bill, described as the Republicans' big, beautiful bill.
Right, which Musk reportedly called the quiet part, said out loud.
And the criticisms laid out in the source are pretty sharp.
They are. It's described as blowing a massive multi-trillion-dollar hole in the deficit, so adding big time to the national debt.
While at the same time proposing huge cuts. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars is the phrase used.
And it gets more specific on those alleged cuts, potentially yanking health care from nearly 14 million people.
14 million?
And making the largest cuts in nutrition assistance in American history. Also mentions devastating cuts to health care and cancer research. Hundreds of billions there, too.
That cancer research point, reading the material, it really jumped out. There's a personal story shared in the source.
Oh, right, about someone benefiting from that kind of research, identifying a genetic risk.
Yeah, potentially life-saving. So then hearing about possible $100 billion cuts in that specific area, it makes you pause, makes you think about the impact.
Definitely. And the source offers an interpretation here, framing certain politicians called MAGA extremists in the text as, well, not caring about these impacts.
But instead focusing on transferring wealth to millionaires, billionaires, corporations. That's the perspective given.
It really frames the debate around these huge spending and cutting decisions and asks, what could this actually mean for people?
For healthcare access, food security, research funding. These aren't just numbers on a page, are they?
Not at all. According to this source, these big policy choices have very real potential consequences for people's lives. That's the connection being made.
Okay, let's switch gears again because the source does. It moves to a totally different kind of government interaction, immigration detention.
Yes, specifically detailing an unannounced visit to the Chrome Center Detention Center down in Miami-Dade County.
And this visit, it was possible because of a specific rule change, an amendment from 2020.
That's right. Allows members of Congress to do these unannounced inspections. And the source says the facility did let them in.
The description of the place itself, it's painted pretty starkly. Oldest ICE detention center in the country.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, yeah. And the source says, quote, it shows.
And the conditions inside. The source reports detainees in a massive pile of people.
Crammed into small rooms, allegedly forced to, eat, sleep, and use a corner toilet all in the same space. Described as a pile of humanity.
Grim picture. And it mentions the numbers, too, facility built for 882, but reportedly holding 1,111 people at the time. Over capacity.
Yeah. And then it brings up those 2 recent deaths at Chrome, the ones that made the news.
And initially reported as natural causes, right? But the source says an investigation found they were due to questionable medical care.
Exactly. And apparently, when asked about the details during the visit, they got vague answers.
There was that specific case mentioned, too, the Ukrainian man who died from a stroke.
And the allegation from facility workers reported in the source that 911 wasn't called for 41 minutes.
41 minutes, when, as the source points out, time is of the essence with strokes.
It's a really troubling detail included there.
The material also gives a kind of breakdown of the people seen there. 60% described as criminals, though many low-level offenses mentioned.
And the other 40% described as people, quote, yanked off the streets who hadn't committed a crime.
And the interpretation given in the source for all this.
The perspective offered is that the administration is trying to, quote, bleach out the United States, deporting as many as possible.
And it names specific nationalities, people from Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba.
Describing those places as brutal dictatorships where people could face harm if sent back.
It certainly puts a spotlight on the conditions of detention and the human side of deportation policies, especially regarding safety concerns for returnees based on this source's account.
Absolutely. Now, there's another major area the source covers ethics, specifically relating to the former president's business ventures.
Right, mentioning an investigation opened by Representative Jamie Raskin.
And it cites ethics experts who apparently called certain crypto ventures like a dinner connected to a meme coin the, quote, starkest example so far of trying to profit from the presidency.
Starkest example. And it lists several specific allegations described as unethical profiteering or unlawful use of the White House.
Yeah, including the claim of selling pardons. There's an anecdote included about someone at that meme coin dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Reportedly gave $1 million, and later their son received a pardon. That's the story presented.
Okay. What else?
Also mentions taking a luxury jumbo jet from Qatar, which the source calls a state sponsor of terror, and describes that as a total violation of the Constitution.
Strong words.
And other things like wheeling and dealing on hotel deals, and the claim that assets were never divested, meaning he was still profiting from business while president.
And the source argues these investigations are important.
Yes, calls them absolutely critical, even from the minority position, to, quote, shine a white-hot spotlight on these activities.
It definitely makes you think about the lines between public office and private business, doesn't it? And the different standards that apply, or are supposed to apply, according to this material.
For sure, how those lines might get blurred.
Okay, one last major topic the source tackles. And it's very timely: FEMA's readiness.
Right, for hurricane season. The comments were apparently made just as the season was starting. There was a briefing with FEMA.
And concerns were raised. One big one mentioned is that FEMA hadn't released its strategic plan for the season. Or maybe pulled it back.
Yeah, which seems concerning, especially since NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is predicting an above-average hurricane season.
Not good timing. And then there's talk of budget cuts.
Expressed concern in the source about potential administration cuts, even mentioning talk of a completely shutting down FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Wow, shutting it down. What would the impact be, according to the source?
Well, it details things like taking away millions needed for reimbursement and recovery aid for states, particularly in Hurricane Alley.
So money for rebuilding after storms.
Exactly. And also impacting the ability to advance the technology and expertise needed for better storm awareness and predictions.
So the science part of it, too.
Right. And NOAA experts cited in the source were apparently very clear on this. They reportedly said that losing those investments would mean less progress, meaning people would be less clear and less certain about what danger approached them, fewer warnings, less accurate forecasts.
That really hits home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
These aren't just like abstract budget numbers. This is about public safety, potentially life-saving information for communities facing storms.
It directly connects budget decisions to preparedness and safety, raises that question about balancing fiscal concerns with essential functions.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, we've really covered a lot based on this one source material. It's kind of amazing how much was packed in there.
It really is. From, Elon Musk and government oversight to economic debates on spending and cuts.
The conditions in that detention center, those ethical allegations surrounding the presidency.
And finally, right up to hurricane preparedness and FEMA funding, it's a wide spectrum.
And just to reiterate, all these specific points, the details, the perspectives, they all came directly from that specific source we were working from today, the interview and comments.
That's right.
So maybe the question for you, the listener, is why look at all this together? What's the value of seeing these different issues presented side by side as this source does?
Well, I think it shows how things we might see as separate, like, say, federal spending debates and conditions in a detention center, are actually connected through government policy and priorities.
Right. Seeing the details from one specific viewpoint, like this source provides, can give you a more maybe nuanced picture than just headlines alone. You see the connections being drawn.
Exactly. It reveals the underlying threads, the recurring themes or concerns that this particular source sees running through different areas of policy and governance.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on all this.
Yeah.
As you reflect on these different pieces, the human side of budget cuts, the reported conditions for detainees, the critical need for disaster readiness, maybe consider how these policy choices, even if they seem unrelated, might actually weave together.
Yeah, how decisions in one area could ripple outwards and affect communities, maybe even your own community, in ways you wouldn't immediately expect across different fronts.
Definitely something to think about.
There's always more to dig into, more to understand about how these systems work and impact people. We always encourage you to keep exploring.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for staying with us. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast for more deep dive conversations. Until next time, stay anchored in truth.